Great. Thanks for joining us today. My name is John Meadows. I'm with Taligent. We are an OpenStack billing and customer lifecycle solution. I'm obviously not Sanjay Mishra. He's our CTO. He'll be up here later this afternoon to talk about Ceilometer and the metering information that you can pull from the Ceilometer component of OpenStack to feed into a billing or chargeback type solution. But today, what I wanted to cover is how chargeback and billing really impacts and drives behavior of your customers or your internal users. So what we've seen, well, let me explain the problem set that we're tackling. That traditional IT, the way that IT services were deployed, a lot of paperwork, people going and having to apply to request resources, and ultimately it is a very inefficient process, but it allows the IT manager to control the resources that are going into the cloud or into the virtual environment. Some of the behavior that drives from your internal users is driving folks away from using the internal IT resources of your organization and pushing them to third-party clouds like Amazon. So Utopia, right? OpenStack. People are going to deploy OpenStack. They're looking at it to create a self-service, on-demand type scenario. So we want to go from having a very static, bureaucratic process to releasing all this opportunity for your users to come and provision the resources that they need in the cloud. But what you need to understand, and what we see, is that we would consider this a day 2 or a day 3 problem, in that most users, most IT guys, as they deploy OpenStack, they think about the technology and how cool it is. They drop in, they provision or set up their hardware, they install their OpenStack, and then somewhere a little bit down the road, they start thinking about how are we going to provide these resources to our customers. And it is a true balancing act to maximize the resources and get the best usage out of the investment that you've made in the environment, but also providing that on-demand flexible service, that self-service model. And the questions that we hear from our customers, one of the key questions is, are we cost competitive with Amazon? And to really understand that, you have to know where you're headed and what you're trying to do and put controls in place. And the reality is that some workloads that your users are interested in may be better suited for third-party cloud like Amazon or Azure. So for that balancing act, really what the goal is, it's considered in economic terms of Pareto Efficiency. So it's the opportunity to maximize the resources such to the point where adding another workload is going to impact other users. So you've maxed out all your systems, your compute nodes, and your storage, and you've gotten to the point where if we're going to continue to expand and add additional users to your workload, then we need to go and add additional hardware. And so that level of efficiency allows you to compete and answer that question, are we cost competitive with Amazon? You certainly can be, but you have to manage and understand what you're trying to accomplish and how your users are consuming those resources. So the way that you can impact this and control those processes, there's a few different ways. Ceilometer, as you'll hear from Sanjay a little bit later on this afternoon, provides an enormous amount of variety of metrics and configuration details about the environment that can be converted and used to create all sorts of different pricing plans and chargeback and billing and what have you. But for a lot of people, it makes more sense to limit the choices and not just turn this open to a complete self-configuration setup. It's also important to have insightful reporting, really understand not just what's happening at a snapshot in time, but as well to understand over time, what are your patterns? What are the seasonalities of your business and how are the users consuming those resources, and what's the variability? And then finally, having a relevant chargeback or showback. It's very difficult in a lot of enterprises to implement an effective chargeback type scenario. We've seen it again and again. There's just a lot of political baggage that goes with it unless you have very high level IT buy-in and maybe even buy-in from other groups, business units and whatnot. So it may be that you end up having to implement a showback or basically trying to just educate your consumers first so they understand what the trade-offs are and how they should best be using the resources available. A particular example that we're talking about, we have a customer who wants to drive their users off of Windows, off of Linux and have a standard Windows environment. That's their request, that's not ours. But what the IT guys are implementing from a chargeback scenario is they're going to charge departments for the Linux. So there's a couple, actually, let me step back. There's a couple of different issues. They'd like to, if the users are going to continue to use the Linux desktops, they at least want to recoup those costs and make it so that the internal Linux desktop users understand that they are consuming a resource, that they are creating cost on the organization. So the chargeback is going to charge departments for the Linux desktops, but they're also charging for state on and off. And as you get into chargeback models, one of the things that you could consider really is not to just charge on a monthly basis, but get more granular and not penalize people. Allow them to turn off a machine and not encourage them to just turn it on and leave it on, but have pricing mechanisms that encourage the right behavior around state. They're going to limit the desktop options. They're going to have 2 or 3 pre-configured Linux desktops that the internal users can choose from. So it's not a myriad of choices. That helps simplify the chargeback and billing model and makes it easier for their customers to understand what's available. And then provide visibility so that as the internal users throughout the month, they can see what their unbilled charges are and what their status is so that they're not surprised at the end of the month. So, like I mentioned, there's a lot of flexibility. I'm pulling this up. We're getting close to the end of the time, so I'm going to wrap up with this slide. I'm going to give a shout out to Owen Rogers at 451. He spends a lot of time on cloud economics, studying the different ways that both service providers and enterprises need to look at the cloud and how it's being consumed. As he's studied it, and again, going back to what the capabilities of Salamidar are, there's just a number of different ways. But what I'd like to leave you thinking about is that it's not just charging for CPU, memory, and disk over a month, but you might want to look at prepaid instances, prepaid desktops, such that it helps with predictability and understanding what your revenue stream is, maybe not so much on the efficiency of the resources. Again, tracking unbilled charges so your users know throughout the month where they stand on their consumption of the resources. And putting in triggers or tiers of services so that as they hit limits on bandwidth consumption, maybe their price goes up or their use of a particular VM is turned off. So with that, it's kind of a brief summary of how we've seen from our customer base how the way that your chargeback and billing solution can drive behavior on your internal usage. A lot of cloud, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of cloud guys, they're getting into it early. You're not thinking through all these different scenarios, but it is important as you get to a self-service model. So we're down in booth E25 downstairs in the Expo Center, so happy to take any questions around billing and chargeback for OpenStack clouds. Thank you very much.